Hey, everybody. Welcome to the For Now Left, Right, and Center show. That could be changing. More to follow on that at some point. If you haven't noticed, there's no Chris tonight. That's because he's on a temporary sabbatical. It'll probably be roughly about a month before we see him again. He's taking care of some personal stuff. So we wish him the best. And we can't wait for him to return so that we can all rag on him. So tonight we're going to be talking about, we're going to be doing a little bit on gun control. We're going to be talking about the two shootings that happened between last episode and this episode, sort of how the country's responding to it. We'll talk a little bit about, again, the gun control narrative that's kind of surrounding it and, what we think about that. And then we're also going to be doing a little bit of bullshit philosophy later. So that should be fun. So we'll get into that when we get into that. But first, I think the very most important thing for people to see is, if you haven't seen this yet, this is our commander-in-chief, the leader of the free world. Oh, shit. Well, so much for image. I guess the White House is saying it was the wind. For those who are just listening, Joe Biden fell up the stairs 3 times.
The wind? Fucking wind.
Oh, they said it. Yeah.
Jesus.
So I mean, it was the White House's response to it. It was, it was super windy. It's like, well, I mean, I'm not seeing it. Like, look, it could have been.
It is super windy.
I love ragging on the guy.
Since when does wind make you miss the fucking step?
I don't. It looks more like tripping to me. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, I think he was I think he tripped. Like, we all fucking trip sometimes, and
yeah.
I mean, he is 97 years old, so
right.
It's a thing.
Even on top of that, like, I also love ripping on the White House, right? Because now it's those guys in there. But I actually don't fault them for even blatantly lying. Let's say it is a blatant lie, right? It wasn't the wind. I don't actually fault them for doing that because, the whole world's watching. Like they have to do PR stuff, and that's not just defending Biden from me. That's defending Biden from the rest of the world, from the communists and whatever it is.
I know, but it's still like, I don't know. Maybe it's just my mindset doesn't work the right way for that shit. But to me, it's like we all trip. Who gives a fuck if you trip? Like, why can't the White House just come out and be like, yeah, he missed the fucking step.
Have a sense of humor about
Chill out, Like, who gives a fuck?
It's probably one of those things where it's like, well, I mean, we know he's almost dead, so like this is a little too close to
Look, I watched it a few times to try and see like what started it. 'Cause, and it looks like his one foot was on the step, but on the edge, not all the way on.
And so
it kind of like slipped off, and then he just never fully recovered. Like he probably tried to like hide it.
I guess, but
and so he took a step and missed again, and then missed again.
Yeah.
But the part that I saw from it is he actually took a pretty good little fall at the end there, like hit his shin right on the edge, and for someone of his age and shit, like
he was probably bleeding.
You can get hurt. Like my parents are younger than him, and like you look at their skin funny, and it rips open and bleeds all over.
I know.
Like they have tissue paper for skin.
Yeah, so, I had a great grandmother who lived to like, I don't know, it was old, 100 past 100, and I just like my dad used to go up to the farm and help her sometimes, but like he just used to tell me horror stories of like he was trying to patch her up with something, and like her skin would just like, not to be graphic, but it's just really easy to tear. And like my dad was freaking out, and my great grandma was like looking at him like, "Will you calm down? Like this happens."
This is what happens when you're a century old,
right?
Yeah. I saw some people talking about the fall, specifically on the right. They're making a big deal out of it, like the left did, like the left did of. I
mean, I did. I'm the one that brought it up.
Yeah. Of Trump not being able to drink the one time out of his glass or whatever. I saw a tweet. I think it was a tweet. I saw a post on it at one point that made a fairly logical point, I guess, and it was like, look, dude tripped. Everybody trips. He's like, the reason that the Trump thing was a little bit more of a story is because it's not very often that someone can't take a drink out of a glass with, like you need 2 hands to like hold something steady, like, and I get it, but at the same time, that wasn't a big thing with Trump either.
Some tiny Trump hands. Well, I mean, it's exactly what you just said. It's like the left made a big deal out of it because it's the Cheeto man.
Yeah, if I had to say which one makes a little more sense, I'd say the glass, because like not being able to pick up a glass and drink is a little more rare, man. I think. But even like still, neither one.
The rest of us, like Sicilians, like look at this. Like,
yeah,
I don't know what Trump is. What ethnicity even is that, man? He's had so much stuff done. It's like you can't even tell anymore.
Yeah, raccoon. He's got to have part raccoon in him.
You know what? He kind of looks like you, Tim.
Kind of looks like me.
Yeah.
That's probably why I'm trying to cover all this up with beard. Then it's really. I know I've said it a few times. This is reaching the end of its days. I think it's either that or I'm going to be a single man again. So. I'm holding off. I know this isn't really on topic, but a personal story. I'm holding off. I'm trying to because I want to go see a beard barber and have him do it nice just one time, just while I have it and see what it's like, and then I'll shave it off. But I'm not sure if I'm gonna be able to get the wife to hold out long enough.
Let me know how that goes. I had a really long beard at one point, down to here. It was real nice. It was like wavy, and my hair actually gets wavy when it gets long. And I remember trying oils on it, but it just like that. It just never worked for me. It didn't do anything. It's just like, okay, great. Now there's oil on my hands and in my beard, and it's like getting on things. I don't get it. I don't know.
Yeah. I bought a beard kit. I've been messing with it. I didn't do anything with it today, and now I have mask beard. I'll tell you what. This is news for anyone that next time we get COVID out here. Do not grow a beard when you got to wear masks. It steams it into like this curled, garbage-looking mess, and you can't get it out. Like
right. Plus, it acts like a ratchet. Right. Every time you talk, my stubble pushes the mask down, so I just get like a and then the mask is under my chin.
Yeah, mine doesn't because it's long enough. It just slides on there, but it's got pressure. You can see it. Look, like it's got a pressure to where the mask sits, and then your breath steams it in place.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's literally like getting a curler and curling your, like it's that, except it looks like shit. It's terrible.
Well, it's behind your mic. So
look, I can't talk about this anymore. It's just starting to get me, hurting me. So no, I'm kidding. So here's a meme I had that I thought was we should try this. Just one election. We should just fucking try it. For those just
listening. I saw that. I was looking at that. I'm going to let you read it in a second, but I was looking at it, and it was kind of one of those things where it's like, I have my hand up to object to it, and then I'm like, you know what? I have no objections.
Let's do it. We should just try it once. All right, so this is a tweet by Kim Schwan. It says, why don't we do election year like The Masked Singer? Every politician is disguised, has to tell us their plans, and debate with distorted voices. We don't know their gender. We don't know their race. We don't know their party. Winners, when the winner rips off their mask on election night, and boom, new president. How awesome is that?
Yeah, because that would remove a whole bunch of problems, right? That's not just. I mean, that person, I almost guarantee that person's like, oh, we got to make it more equitable because women, black people, right? Because she thinks there's that kind of oppression. I'm saying that the biggest barrier to entry is not your race, gender, or ethnicity. I think the biggest barrier to entry is name recognition, right? And so if you don't know who's behind the mask, then by virtue of like, you don't get that advantage of having name recognition. So we're just going to go for the best people.
Could you imagine the slander commercials that come out? It's like Big Bird voted no against gun control.
No, that would be so great, right? Because then you would have to talk about the topics. There's nothing else to talk about. Like
I'm the purple bear and I approve this message. Like, what are the commercials gonna be?
I gotta say though, the whole thing's done when one of them uses two of their paws to pick up the glass and take a drink. It's like,
right, yeah. We would obviously know Trump's running again, so then it's out, yeah. Or they stumble down the stairs, or if one of them is getting a blowjob under the desk. Oh wait, no.
Now, which one of those is Jill, and which one of those is which one of those is Ron Paul?
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, I like the idea from the standpoint of we're voting on policy, politics, policy, not politics. Sorry, it'd be refreshing, but I really think we'd be shocked at who we voted for.
There's an interesting thing that we don't actually realize. Like we as human beings just going through life know almost nothing about why we do what we do. And like part of that, like one random thing that I'm thinking of is that we actually elect people who are at the top, I would say top 50% of the good looking spectrum, right? I know that doesn't always hold, but we actually place a lot of weight on how people look. Right. And you say like Trump is orange and, he's Cheeto dust and all that kind of stuff. But like as far as the population goes, like he would be above 50%. He still counts. But the average politician is a little bit better looking than the average person. Right. And that means that we have a subtle bias. And now the question is, right.
So I don't think it's subtle. It's not subtle. There's been studies done that show that it's not subtle, that it like literally people think more attractive people are more skilled, more intelligent, more able. It like you just look at him, you're like, yep, that guy can get his shit done.
Right.
Like it's crazy.
Right up until they open their mouth, right?
And it's also not just on that front, but especially for males. Like if you look at YouTube, the videos, I forget, there was a video I watched of, it was a creator who was talking about how to get more views, and they basically were like, you have to put the sexy girl in the screenshot that's going to show up on the thing, right? And I find myself not even purposefully doing that. Like today I was scrolling through and there was a picture of a girl and my eye just went straight to it, and I was like, yeah, she's pretty cute. And then I read the name of the video and I was like, oh yeah, I'd like to see what that's about, right? But I never would have even, like, how many other videos did I just scroll past that my eye didn't stop on and then look at, right?
Yeah, there's an interesting phenomena that I noticed with myself, and it's not really the sexy girl thing, but it has to do with this image correlation with, say, for example, a news story. And there's this very interesting thing that happens to me, and it really bothers me that I'm so handicapped by this. But sometimes when I'm I'll pull up, say, Yahoo News, right? And it's got, 20 pages worth of scrolling to do with just article after article after article, and each one has a little square with a little picture that's associated with the article, right? Mm-hmm. And occasionally Yahoo News will load in slowly or in such a way where the thumbnails won't load in, so it'll just be a whole bunch of titles. And it's so weird because I have no idea what to look at. Like I have a functionally harder time picking the news stories when there's no picture associated with it, even though I know that I like certain things. Like I want to read about gun control, or want to read about like whatever it is. Like I know what I'm there for and I know what I usually like, but for some reason you take the picture out of it and suddenly I'm just like not interested in any of the stories. Mm-hmm. And they're not even like clickbaity pictures, right? They're just like a picture, just a picture.
That's something that I was reading about that people do on Reddit. A lot of times you'll see someone put up a post and they'll just attach some random picture to it, because if it doesn't have a picture, no one looks at it. No one stops.
Right.
And it's just a subconscious thing. But those are all really interesting things we don't think about. The people that study this shit, they know it. All the people that do advertising and running campaigns, they know how to do this stuff, right? But as an everyday Joe, people don't pay attention to it. I don't really either, and I assume I probably pay attention more than most, just because we're talking about it, right? Like,
those the sexy girl ones. I don't click on them out of spite because I'm so hyper aware of the fact that people use that.
And this one was just the face of a girl. She wasn't like, it wasn't like a girl in a bikini, or she was just a cute girl, and it was her face, and she was giving a speech about something. But had that been, me, some, overweight, red bearded, bald dude, whatever.
Hey, that's what's on the front of all of our episodes. I think we should.
I think we don't get more viewers. We need to get one of our wives or fiancés or whatever up in here to be our poster girls.
Yeah, it's like,
that's sexist. Don't say things like that.
Picture unrelated.
Don't say things like that. That's sexist. It's just human nature. Like,
right. Or you gotta do something like make a face and then
yeah,
a red circle and like have like stress lines or like arrows and circles. Oh God, I hate it. It's just all so cringe. It's so cringe. All right, okay, all right. Let's move on here. So I don't have another meme, but it has been a long time since we've reviewed on the show the state of COVID. So I have my two favorite metrics. For a while, I was just looking at excess mortality. And excess mortality is a way to look at what is the normal amount of deaths that you experience in a year versus what are we seeing now, right? So they sort of extrapolate a trend line out saying, oh, about 50,000 people should be dying this month because that's kind of like the moving average of the last 5 or 10 years or something like that. So that's my favorite thing to figure out. Is there a pandemic, right? Early on when people were like, COVID's fake, COVID's this, that, the other thing. It's not real. It's just the flu. It's like, okay, well, we can tell if we look at the excess mortality charts to see whether something new is going on here. So this has been my favorite metric all the way through. I look at it quite frequently, and we haven't looked at it for a while here. But so this would have been the initial spike when we started spreading COVID, and you'll see that if you look at the cases that we found, the cases were way lower than this. So you could tell that before we were even able to test for COVID, it was still killing people, right? Even though the caseload was rather low. So you see it spike, and then it spiked over the summer, and then over this winter, we went way up. It peaked, and then it shot down, right? Which is really good. And these lines below here are not up to date yet. You got to go back like 4 weeks to be up to date, but we're actually pretty close. We're pretty close to the moving average of deaths, right? So we're coming back down to something that resembles normalcy.
Yeah, a couple comments I think important to say on that. One is, it's becoming more clear that a major negative of COVID is the side effects that people are stuck with long term. Not like if they don't pass away. So this is a great representation of, what was the original fear and the major fear of COVID, which was, high death rate. But there are other things that play in. So even if we're able to prevent people from dying, some of the long-term things are pretty shit. But the second thing is, I think I agree with you. We're pulling out of this. It looks like, and it feels like, but those numbers there at the end of the year, into the winter, and then through now, those are actually probably a lot worse than they look. And the reason being is all of our safety measures we took basically eliminated the flu this year.
Yeah, I haven't been sick in a year. I've been talking with a whole bunch of people. I haven't had a cold. I haven't had a sniffle. I haven't had anything.
Yeah. So you think about, the normal number of people, tens, 30s of thousands, hundreds of thousands. I don't actually remember the number anymore, but it's a very significant number of people that die from the flu every year. And that didn't really happen this year. So we're still above the expected death rate, which would have included the flu deaths. Right. So really, I guess the point I'm making is like, if you really looked at how many deaths were probably attributed to COVID, it's probably higher than it looks like on there. But yeah, the good news is, we're coming out of it. People are getting their shots. My wife has gotten her first vaccine. I'm scheduled to get mine on Friday, my first one. So we're hopefully, a month or two away from being able to return to some semi-normalcy.
Yeah, I can't wait to have orgies again. It's going to be great. So, and then I'll just move on to this one. So this is the new cases, right? So the cases actually don't look as optimistic, but I can explain why in a second. So for those who are listening, again, the caseload that I see here doesn't go all the way back to the beginning of the pandemic, but it spikes up over the winter, right? And then it drops off sharply again, but it actually levels out at a pretty high rate. The level that we're not quite level yet, so it's still kind of going down a little bit, but this is about the amount of caseload that we have right now is about equivalent to the peak it was in the middle of last summer, right? So not the peak when it started, but the peak in the middle of the summer, which was I don't know, about 5,000 cases daily, or 50,000 cases daily.
Still a lot.
So the reason why this apparently isn't that bad, and it's still not good, because there's a chance that they're going to get the glass lung, and they're going to get not be able to taste their food for a long time. Aside from that, the reason why this is not too bad is because this is a lot of younger people that are getting it, right? Most of the elderly population in the United States at this point has been vaccinated, which is really, really good. So the people who typically die from this aren't the ones who are getting it anymore, right? This is all spring breakers and people who are, have cabin fever and are just, pretty much saying fuck it at this point. So, all right. So that was it. Just wanted to review how COVID's looking.
Yeah, it's good. I like the data.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm just buttering it for later.
So I got this one. It's completely meme, off topic, not political, but I figured it hit home for you, and thought maybe the Navy should implement this as part of the carrier groups that they have out there. So I felt like this would be
Oh, fantastic. Is that a go-kart? Yes.
Fantastic.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Why not? We decommission an aircraft carrier. We just repurpose it into this right here.
Right.
There's a car on this one down there.
Yeah, I see that. I'd say the penalties for missing your turn there are a little extreme. I'm not seeing too big of a border.
You'd probably be all right. What happens if you fall off that? You can be all right. They get you back out. Is it too high?
You're probably not going to be all right. You're from falling from a carrier deck, you might break something. You're going to get the wind knocked out of you, and then you're going to get banged up against the side of the hull, and then when you get towards the back of it, you're going to get sucked down underwater. It's really, really not pleasant. It's not a good scenario.
Well, we could put some nets up or something, man. This is a prototype, okay? This is, it's not fully fleshed out yet, but I still think
all for personal responsibility. No safety nets.
Yeah.
Like what I did there. All right. So, I don't know if you have another meme you want to share. I actually don't have any more.
Yeah. I've got a couple we can, I can find, let's see which one makes the most sense to maybe talk about here. This one's on topic, huh? So this is
we'll talk about this in a second. Go ahead, read it out.
This meme says it's got a picture, 4 different pictures of a silhouette of a man holding a gun. Under each one says it's at the top says if the shooter turns out to be, and then it says Hispanic, it says build the wall, Arab, ban Muslims, Black, BLM or terrorists, and then white, it says we need to ask ourselves how we as a society failing these poor troubled young men. What kinds of movies, video games, and music are we making?
Okay. All right. So I hear you. All right. So this is obviously that was a meme that was directed towards the right. Now let me real time live flip this on its head. Okay. So I'm gonna make this meme live, but I'm gonna send it back to the left. All right. So for people on the left, no, bring it back up. I need it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't have an eidetic memory. All right. So if you're on the left and the shooter turns out to be Hispanic, you actually just don't report on it at all. If he turns out to be Arab, it's not all Muslims. If he turns out to be Black, it's that he was poor and systemic racism has oppressed his people, and so what can you expect him to do? And then if it's white, it's white supremacy, and the whole system needs to be torn down to stop white supremacy. There you go. That's been a live remaking of a meme from yours truly. If any of you fuckers post it before I do, I'm suing you.
Yeah, that one I felt like kind of was on topic a little bit. So.
Yeah, well, I'm about to complain about some of that stuff as soon as we get to the other things. So.
Yeah. What do you think? What do you think about this one? So it says, being a server for the past 3 years, I can say without a shadow of a doubt that the Sunday after church crowd is full of the rudest, most self-entitled, and most ignorant people to ever walk this earth. I'm first going to state that anyone in this day and age, any grouping of people this day and age, will not be in the most ignorant people to ever walk this earth. It's just not possible. We're the most educated people to walk this earth at this point.
Even the least educated among us.
Yeah. So this guy's full of shit, man.
Look, here's what I would say to that. It would not surprise me to find out that the Sunday crowd is like this or more like this than not. It would not surprise me because I grew up going to church. However, I will say that is something that we, as a generally atheist population, that's something that we kind of like to believe rather than we know to be true, right? So when somebody says that, I'm sure this person did have that experience, but we tend to put way more weight on that than we probably should, right? Just because we kind of want to believe, because it's a funny twist of irony, right? It's supposed to be the moral people, and then they end up being the shitty people, and we just kind of believe it because we want to, because it's ironic and it makes us feel good about being atheists.
Yeah, it's anecdotal, right? It's
right.
You know, I've heard servers, make these types of comments about a lot of other groups of people. One that is specifically I heard a lot and is very true is it's foreigners.
Oh, well, because they don't know.
It's a different culture. Yeah, exactly. It's not like a slight on them as a person. It's just
okay. So, but you're talking about tipping, right? Are they?
No, they also don't. They don't treat. They don't from the people I know that were in the business. They don't treat them the same either. Like with the same kind of kindness or respect. They're not. They're just like in Europe. When I went to Europe frequently, they come across as rude to us.
Right, because they're not asking us, every 10 minutes how our meal's going, and they're not smiling and dancing and prancing around.
Well, yeah, but I just mean as a culture also. Like, there's no, like, when you're walking past someone on the street that you don't know, and you're in that awkward range where you might make eye contact, or, right. There's no, like, passing, like, hey, how you doing? Like, they just act like you're not fucking there. Like, and so we take it, in our culture, it's kind of rude. It's like, well, what the fuck, But
right, you're supposed
in their culture, it's just, like, it is what it is.
Like look down or like look away or pretend that you need to look at your phone or something. Like I need to, like what are you, a psychopath?
Yeah, it's so. I mean, it's just a difference in culture in some cases, but yeah. All right, last one. This one's also more humor than anything. Should be a quick one. It says, after seeing half a country actively reject wearing a mask during a pandemic, I would like to apologize to the filmmakers of every horror movie ever made for calling their characters unbelievably dumb for going into the murder basement.
Oh my goodness. Yes. Yeah. So yes. And that reminds me of something. I'm so sorry I don't have this pulled up, but I saw an article earlier today. Who was that? Who was the Lynn Wood and Sidney Powell? Sidney Powell? Did you read about this? Do you remember who Sidney Powell is?
No.
Sidney Powell is she's like one of the two big lawyers that was pushing Trump's election fraud claims. Like she was one of the big ones, and she actually got booted, but that's a whole nother thing. Anyways, so she was the big one, right? It was between her and Lynn Wood. Like she was the person who was talking about Dominion voting systems, who was talking about the rigged election, talking about all of the different states where this went wrong and why it went wrong, and coming out with heavy accusations, right? So Dominion is suing her for damages for about like 1.2 or 3 billion. And she just came out, her lawyers made a statement. The statement was something to the effect, and I'm paraphrasing here. The statement was, and I'm paraphrasing, that you would have to be stupid to believe that she actually meant the things that she said about Dominion voting systems. That is her legal defense.
Dude, that's what Tucker Carlson's legal defense was, and it worked.
Oh, well, that's slightly different. He's an entertainer, right? They called this like, no, he's not news. He's an entertainer. Look, I see you.
Yeah, his lawyer's defense legally was you'd have to be basically whatever their term was, but it basically meant you'd have to be a moron to actually believe what he's saying.
You're right. I thought I did remember. They did say something like that, didn't they? Yeah. Well, so now so she used that. So I hope
if it works once, shame on you.
I hope that's a good, yeah, I know. I hope that's a good crack in the wall, right? Because I really try not to look down on people who believe things that I really think are conspiracy theorists. Because woe is me, but like just being on the right, I am misunderstood all the time, right? And that is a fact. Like I sound like I'm complaining. I'm not really complaining. I'm just saying like there's a whole bunch of people who don't know why I believe what I believe because it's just not really common knowledge what the in-depth.
Do you think that's only true for you on the right or for those on the right? I mean, the same thing is true. That's why we're doing this conversation. This podcast is because it's the same thing for people on the left. It's the same people for me, for people in the center.
To a certain degree, but my contention with you is that.
I mean, is it that your beliefs are so much more complicated than everybody else's? Like, why do you think that you are more misunderstood than anyone else?
Okay, that's a very big conversation. It's. Hey,
I got time. Let's do it. I got time.
Listen, man. Look. Perfect example. The average person on the left thinks that the Republican Party is shaped around racism, and that it's all dog whistles, and that our policy really is racist, even if we dress it up. That's a perfect example, right? That's 100% not true, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I would you could flip that around and say the average person on the right thinks that all the left, the average left, whatever, your same wording there. Is based around wanting to change our country over to a completely socialist country, right? To get rid of democracy and go to socialism.
Okay, so
and that's not the case either, right?
So there are. Listen, I'm not saying there's not ignorant people on both sides. I'm saying, as a rule, Democrats believe that, and then the fringe Republicans will believe what you just said, and. And when I say that, I mean the fringe believe exactly what you just said, because it is actually somewhat accurate to say that the Democratic Party is moving in a socialist direction, right?
Yeah, I'd say that.
Right. So like the people who think that there's literally that the left is pushing for a literal socialist takeover, those people are a little bit more fringe and maybe a little crazy, maybe like a little bit, right? So my point here is that there's a somewhat accurate assertion from the right, and then on the left you have something that's just absolutely completely false, right? The Republican Party has absolutely nothing to do with racism.
If you sound very, very biased right now.
So that's one example, Timothy.
Yeah. Your argument is that you guys, your party, the right, the Republican Party is on average, more accurate in your belief of the other party than they are of you.
Correct. I think that's absolutely true.
And if you talk to any person on the left, they're going to say the same thing about themselves. They have a more accurate view of what you are than you have of them.
Right. But okay.
Like so, you see how biased that argument is, and doesn't really hold much water.
I wouldn't be on the right if I did not believe the things that I believed. I would also not make that argument if I didn't believe it.
Well, I know.
I can't just exceed on the grounds that my argument is potentially biased, right? You have to demonstrate to me that I'm actually wrong.
Well, you haven't demonstrated to me that you're right. You made an assumption about half the country. You didn't show me any data.
Listen, I'm the one that knew Chris before this because I've talked to a whole bunch of people like him. I'm aware of what they believe and what they don't believe.
Right? Chris is one man. He's one man.
I
live in a very heavily Republican area. Most of my friends and family are strongly Republican. I also know what they believe. I know that they believe, some of them, not extreme people. These are family members, friends I've known my whole life. Believe that all Mexicans are rapists, shit like that. Like they actually, they take the ones that come here. That Mexico sends us their rapists. Yeah, they believed that shit.
Yeah, I'm sure you're not quite fully understanding what they're saying.
100% was not a misunderstanding. They clearly said that. They believed it.
Are you telling me to take your word for
it? This isn't secondhand. This is firsthand conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I tell you that all the time.
But the point being, like, it's not I'm in the center because I look at both sides and I see you both saying the same thing, right? And I said I'm in the center and I see both sides and I see you both saying the same thing about each other. And most likely, my opinion, my view is that you both see each other poorly. You both are wrong about the other side.
So listen, I think the fundamental difference, I really do believe that the fundamental difference is that the right knows what the left thinks and still thinks they're wrong. The left doesn't know what the right thinks. Like nobody on the left knows the arguments, like any of them. They don't know any of our arguments about feminism. They don't know any arguments about, like, people just as a rule generally don't understand why the wage gap isn't a thing, right? As a default American, a default liberal, a Democrat, you don't know why Republicans say that, right? So then you just assume it's sexism. And that's why we have an imbalance in this country where one side thinks the other's evil and the other side just thinks that the other side's stupid, right?
I know. I 100% agree with that comment that on both sides, to me, it's mostly based around the media that we get, right? We don't see true conversation with the other side these days. If you're looking at large media, you're either heavily right biased or heavily left biased, and that's the story they're telling you.
Right.
They're telling you that the right is racist or the left is socialist, and that's the story. That's it.
Yeah. Hey, look, I mean, for those of you who are watching this, I mean, you are a strange animal, right? Because when we were putting together this podcast, one of our biggest questions was, I mean, who's going to click on a video that has a 1/3% chance of telling you that you're wrong? Like, who wants that? You know, maybe someday when we get, super rich and famous and there's millions of you out there, we'll do a demographic assessment and see who it is that's watching us. But, I think it's just, it is interesting because, even the small amount of people that we get, I am surprised that you watch. It's interesting. Like, again, it's sort of like not human nature. It is definitely not human nature to repeatedly go back to something that stings you, right? It takes some kind of external force, and I'm kind of wondering what that is.
Yeah.
So we can capitalize on it and get rich.
Yeah. So I'm all out of memes. Let's
Bird. All right, so let's move into the two shootings, right? So there was the shooting in Atlanta, and then there was the shooting in Boulder, Colorado. And so it's a shame Chris isn't here, because a lot of times it's gonna feel like I'm lopsided, like I'm sort of like punching into air, and I'm not balanced because I'm just gonna like punch past and miss Chris because he's not here. So I'm not quite sure how to phrase this without him here. Typical of the left to generate narratives. I'm not being very good at this. It's no surprise the way that these stories were handled, right? There seems to be, to me, and I'm curious what you think about this, Tim. It seems actually somewhat formulaic, like the meme that you brought up, right? So like, again, if the shooter is white, right, what we get is a lecture on white supremacy, right? So it's like, yeah, well, of course he's white. We live in a white supremacist system where, systemic racism is built into the fabric of the country, and white men are feeling threatened by the left, and they're, retaliating, like whatever it is. Like, the narrative is white supremacy. And of course, right now you always tie it back to Trump, and the past 4 years you tie it to Trump. It's like something Trump said, like especially, okay, so the Atlanta shooting, you have a convergence of two different things, right? You have the media who's been slobbering about anti-Asian violence, which has been on the rise. And then they've also been slobbering about Trump. And so they got to do two things. They got to tie Trump's quote unquote anti-racist rhetoric to a real life shooting, right? So they say Trump saying Wu flu, or, Wuhan virus or China virus increases the anti-Asian sentiment in the country, which in turn results in the white supremacists shooting up massage parlors, essentially, right? So that was the sort of like axiomatically generated, or the ideologically generated story that was, of course, going to come out, right? It's just plug and play with these people. There's rules, right? And those rules are, if it's a white guy, it's white supremacy, right? If it's if it's against Asians, it's a hate crime. You know, whether or not it is actually a hate crime, right? And so that was actually one of the big things with this. So
I don't most of what I looked at, and I don't frequent most of the big media stuff. I don't really watch TV. I don't watch news. I get all of my news through digital means, internet and things, and I didn't see a lot of conversation about it being racially driven or white supremacy driven or associated anything with Trump.
Catch it like the night of?
No, probably mostly the next day, in the following days. And from what I saw, it was, the guy had issues with some sexual workers,
yeah.
Which is weird that he went after.
There's a whole bunch of stuff that came along with this. This was the white guy, right? So this was a white guy. He shot up 3 massage parlors. He killed 8 people, 6 of which were Asian. And so with the heightened tensions around anti-Asian hate, a lot of people were saying that this was, everybody, Tim, like all of the politicians, everybody blue check marked on Twitter was, all up in arms about anti-Asian hate. There were marches, there were, visuals, there were all this kind of stuff. There was marches for, Black and Asian solidarity. And, it turns out, like he said, that he was sex addicted, right? And that's why he did it. And so just my challenge too, if there's anybody on the left who's listening, and this would be mine to Chris if he was on here, is if you are jumping to a conclusion that's ideologically generated, right? And by that, I mean you have a rule, and the rule is that if there's a shooting and it's a white guy and it's against Asians, it's anti-Asian hate. If you have that rule and you just go with that and your bubble never gets pricked, like you got to be really careful. Like make sure that there's actually evidence of the thing that you're saying, right? For example, if it came out that this guy had like long screeds against Asians on his Facebook, great, sure. It looks like it's probably a hate crime at that point, right? But like if you just believe something without evidence and then you just go with it and you don't bother to check your biases, like you're part of the problem, right? And we all do that. I'm not preaching at you. I'm preaching at myself as well, and anybody on the right. You got to be really careful about just ideologically generating conclusions and then not checking them, right? It's going to be deadly if we don't pull some of that back.
Yeah, I generally agree, and I think what you find on the media side is to cover their bases. They'll say, was this a hate crime? White guy kills a bunch of Asians. Was it a hate crime? Could it have been? Do you think it was? Hey, Jan, what do you think? Do you think it was? And then it just puts that thought in your head,
yep.
Right? Now you think they said to you, "Oh, it's a hate crime," and they didn't. Right. They were they were trying to, but they didn't come out and directly say it. So
right, and some of them and some of them they issue corrections, and that's the correct thing to do. Or in the case of what you just said, they don't actually have to issue corrections because it was speculation or opinion or whatever it was. I think the worst, and this is on both sides. You hate seeing people get called out, like when Ted Cruz got called out. You hate seeing people not apologize for something that was blatantly wrong, right? So some of the blue check mark people I mentioned, who were just like, oh, of course it's a white guy and of course it's Asians. They just full on go with the narrative and state something as fact. And then they'll say something like, oh, well, it doesn't matter if this particular one was motivated by anti-Asian hate. This still speaks to the larger problems of blah, 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 like marginalization, throwing a whole bunch of buzzwords into it. It's like, yeah, you were wrong. You were wrong. So, fess up, buddy.
Yeah. I mean, you know me well enough to know I'm 100% against any sort of hate crimes. It doesn't matter who it's against. But I think our news needs to be more careful about what they say, because they're building
there is bad news out there. We don't click on it. I have an app on my phone right now that I don't use that's specifically to aggregate news from the left and the right and present it in a neutral fashion, and I just don't care about it because it doesn't grab my attention. I don't know what to say. It's we're creatures of instinct and habit, and apparently we just.
The more and more we talk about this, the more I think that we need to treat our information sources like we treat weight loss or something, right? Like you can't just always eat cake. You're gonna be fucking obese, right? If all you eat all day is like 6 cakes a day, you're gonna have problems. You know, and if you do the same thing with the information you're putting into your brain, if you're just piling in all this garbage all the time, you're gonna have problems. You got to eat some goddamn vegetables, okay?
Listen, and we're just
right in center show once in a while.
We're privileged, okay? We do this podcast, so we have to eat that cake. Sometimes, no, like honestly, it's funny because I do have that app on my phone. Part of the reason why I don't use it actually is because I am looking for that biased news, right? So I get to complain about it on here. I also need to see what the other side is saying, and kind of wading through the shit type deal. But it's kind of funny. Yeah, everybody else, you need to download the app called, and they're not a sponsor, but download an app called Grounded. It's really good. They take a news topic, right, and they have everything sorted by news topic. So you click on the news topic, not an article, and then they have 6 or 7 articles listed below, and they'll have the bias associated with it, and then they'll give you things like the spread, like who's covering this, left or right. Like this is like only Republicans covering this, is only Democrats, or maybe it's an even split or something like that. And it's really good. You really should, whoever you are on either side, I would definitely get that app. It's really good.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out. I didn't know about it. Yep. Also, while we're on the topic of Grounded, the video game's really good too.
Oh yeah. It's fantastic.
So the other shooting, the more recent one, the mall.
Yes, in Boulder, Colorado.
It was a mall, right?
It was. Yep.
Yeah.
So
I haven't heard. Did they have a motive for that yet? Last I saw, they didn't.
No, last I heard nothing.
Yeah.
It just. Again, with the procedurally generated narratives, right? So what happened is that we got one long-range grainy picture of the guy, and he looked like he was going to be white, right? And so everybody, again, they turned up to full speed on the narrative, like this is a white guy, this is, white supremacy, Donald Trump's probably responsible for this, like just full speed, no self-awareness, no caution, no waiting. And it turns out that the guy's name is Ahmad Aliwi Alisa, which is not a typical white guy name, right? So he turns out to be Syrian. And it's like, again, like everybody has to eat their tweets, I guess you would say. Like, did we not learn from a couple weeks ago, right? And the answer is no, absolutely, right? Absolutely not, right? Because you don't, on Twitter especially, you don't reward caution. You don't reward accuracy. You reward emotional response, right? So if you garner the largest emotional response, you get the most likes, and you get the biggest dopamine hit of your life. So they don't give a shit. And it continues.
Yeah. Yeah, until we know more, I mean, it's tragic. All of these shootings are tragic.
Agreed.
And we've talked about gun control before. I believe we talked about shootings before, and they're emotional. They hit you in a place different than a lot of other shootings and killings and homicides that happen with weapons, right? We don't, when you hear about, some guy getting shot in a drug deal or something.
Yeah, there's not much emotional resonance.
Your brain doesn't go straight to gun control, right? Like you don't. No, it doesn't. But when you hear about somebody getting shot in a mass shooting or something like that, you immediately do. And I think it's because it makes it more real for you. Maybe like you're like, right. Well, I don't do drug deals, so I'm good. Like, they shouldn't have drug deals.
It's the sort of like reading about shark attacks. Like, well, hold on, people who are swimming in the ocean got bit. Like, I go swimming in the ocean. I know you don't, Tim, because what do you have, a Great Lake? I travel. Okay. Man,
I've been outside of my state before. Okay.
I can't. You'd be as red as that guy on your right hand. It's probably your left hand shoulder.
Oh yeah. I don't do well in the sun. That's for sure. But to be honest, sunscreen works really well. It really does. So,
like what, SPF 500?
I think I use like 60 or 70, or I don't know. I use some pretty high SPF, but I don't get burned when I put it on. So, off topic, little.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it's an empathy thing, but this is also, this kind of leans into, it's the thing that I was trying. The topic, I think, was the first bullshit philosophy with Nathan segment where I completely botched it, but I think it might have been the first one. I think it was where I was trying to say that we don't have the correct sort of brain structures or mental processes to handle data on large scales, right? So we don't know how to appropriately respond to the fact that more people died in Chicago on every weekend for the past, 50 years than died in the, Colorado shooting. Like 3 times as many, right? Every weekend in one city, So it's like, well, what's the proper emotional calibration, right? There is that thing that you just said. It's like, well, I don't get into drug deals, so I don't have to worry about gang wars, right? So there's that sort of disattachment. And it's the randomness that kind of strikes out about the mass shootings. So I mean, that's I suppose a slight rationalization there, but at the same time, it's there have been apparently, according to statistics, there's been 7 mass shootings. It depends on how you calibrate for what a mass shooting is, but there have been about 7 mass shootings a year since 2012. It's like, oh my God, 7 mass shootings a year. That sounds horrible. And every single one of them is a tragedy, but it's 7 mass shootings in a country of 300 million people, right? Which is another number that we can't really comprehend, right? We could probably do it in small chunks. It's like, well, I know what 1,000 is. If you just do like 1,000 of those, then you get to 1 million, and then it's 300 of the, you could lever yourself up to there, but we have no concept of what it means to be in such a vast country of people. And to see the statistic that there's 7 mass shootings in the per year every year since 2012, I just don't think we know what to do with that. And one of the things that we do with that is try to control the situation, because we're humans. So we run to gun control.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good thing that it brings up the gun control conversation, because I do think we need to increase our gun policies and gun control. I'm not for taking away people's weapons in general, like just like, oh, no more guns, take them away, or anything like that.
Well, what kind of controls?
I'm more interested in working on limiting access to people that have history of bad decision making and things like that. Increasing education requirements before you can own firearms, things like that. Better tracking of firearms, like maybe removing. So I know we've talked about this before, yeah. And when we did, you were like, yeah, that doesn't exist, but it does, just not in your state, so you weren't aware of it. Of being able to sell at gun swap meets or whatever without registrations and things. But things like that, right? More or less just tightening the control a little bit, making it a little more difficult to get, a little better education. Maybe something similar to a driver's license, where you have to pass a test or something to get to, and maybe this exists in some cases. I'm not sure.
It absolutely does. That's what I was going to say. And it is dependent on the state. And I had an article up earlier. I kind of got rid of it because it was only sort of tangentially related. But I think there's like 17 states now where you don't need a permit to buy a rifle. And then I think it was in New Hampshire. I think New Hampshire is a straight constitutional carry state. You don't need a permit at all.
Yeah.
Don't know where I was going with that. Oh, yeah, you were saying, my state, like, look, man, what my state does is probably pretty good. I think the process was delayed a little bit because of everybody. I think it was late last year. Everybody was buying guns because they thought the Civil War was coming, and still do. So everybody's still buying guns. So the process was kind of delayed because of that. But the process here in my state, in Connecticut, is actually pretty good. It's really, and when I say good, I mean like about as strict as I would be comfortable allowing. Like
I think your state is one of the strictest. Your state's one of the strictest in the nation, I think.
Yeah, and we can't buy AR-15s here, which is a real big bummer. Big bummer.
Well, I guess that kind of goes on to one point that I think is an interesting one that you hear a lot from the left and people saying we need to ban guns. They say, well, you don't need an assault rifle, right? You don't have any need for it. I don't need a lot of things that I am able to get or have, right? I don't think that's a good argument.
Right. Not only that, I don't even have to justify it to you. It is not up to you whether I need it or not. It's not. You can fuck off. I don't care what you think I need. I'll determine that.
Well, that's not a good argument either.
I don't care.
Well, yeah, I know you don't, but you should. There's many examples of things that the government has restricted from us, right? In that light, I mean, marijuana is a very simple example, right? Like, you don't need it. But it has been restricted from us, and we are accepting of it as a society to some degree. But it is still currently law, right?
Hey, I'm still consistent there. It's like if you don't want me to have weed, you can fuck off. I don't care what you think I need.
Yeah, but I would go out on a limb to argue that there's been times where you followed the law regardless of your belief, right?
Correct. Yes.
Maybe not always.
No, and there is
at some point you
right. Like, look, and I do not mind the restrictions on fully automatic weapons. You know, everybody can't have a tank and a bazooka. Like, I'm not one of those guys. You know, so like, obviously, I am being a little bit facetious, but you know,
it goes back to my common point.
I would say that because I'm culturally frustrated, right? Because I've been in the debate for so long, and you know, obviously, I'm one person. Sure, I have a small podcast, but you know, basically, like all of you, my voice goes unheard, essentially. And it's not like even the people who have the biggest platforms, they're not really making much change. Most of the people, like Colleen Noir, is the best Second Amendment rights YouTuber that I'm aware of. And while I'm sure he's changed some people's minds, it's like moving the needle in a country, like getting an issue, advocating for the changing of the way people think about an issue is just like it's impossible. So at the end of the day, I'm willing to argue the merits of it, but functionally speaking, the answer is fuck off. You can't tell me what I do and do not need.
People are changing their views on it. They're just not changing them in your direction. They're changing them in the opposite direction in general, right? Like
do you have that
data? Not pulled up, but I read it yesterday when I was looking this up.
Read? I'll take a paraphrase. I've been paraphrasing all day.
The country's agreement, openness, willingness, something along those lines, to increase gun control has been increasing over time.
Was that Pew Research?
I don't recall.
I saw a graph from Pew, and I generally respect them. The number of people who want more restrictions is higher. I don't think it's going up, but it is higher than it's actually lower than it was 10 years ago.
It wasn't the number of people, it was the percentage of
the percent.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about.
That's a fair distinction to make, though, because obviously population can change.
Population, I think, has been stagnant, hasn't it?
I said can change. I didn't say it's increasing, but yeah, we've been pretty stagnant, and we're likely going to go down.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, going forward, population will likely.
Kids, everybody. Not me. You have kids.
Yeah, I have two. I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part.
We are replacing ourselves in the American economy. So
don't you need another 0.3 kids, Tim? Why are you slacking?
0.3. Look, I'm a big dude, okay, but I don't count as more than one person. My wife counts as one person.
Isn't replacement like 2.3? Because you need to like some kids are like some people die, some people just don't have kids. Like 2.3.
Well, 2.7. My kids seem to be about as smart as me, so they are definitely replacing multiple kids from other people. That was too far.
Knee pads.
Yeah. So I think I do think people's opinions are changing, and that they're changing in the opposite direction of your stance. Not that they're opposing you; they're just shifting that way, right? And
they don't know about me.
And no, I just mean your view. You're like not you, but the Republican view, the conservative view, whatever.
Well, that's a weird distinction. If for example, if you want to ban AR-15s, you're opposed to me.
No, what I'm saying is I don't think most people want to ban all guns. They want to increase
loopholes and kind of the more common sensey kind of stuff.
Yeah, like better screenings, better background checks, et cetera, right? Those types of things.
Yeah.
So I don't view that as necessarily being opposed to your point of view of we should still be able to own firearms, right? Like I'm taking a kind of very basic look at it in that aspect.
Yeah.
But the point I was trying to get to is, within our country, we're very divided, but as a world, we are way old school. Way old school. Like,
yeah.
Nobody owns guns like we do.
That's just uniquely sort of American, right? Because we had a right to our Constitution.
People own weapons like crazy, back in the day. I don't know what day, but a day.
Colonial America, maybe South America. I don't know.
Yeah,
South and Central America.
We still haven't moved on from that time period. We're still there.
Look. It is old school, but old school American, right? It was enshrined in our Constitution, but like, you think everybody had muskets in Britain? No,
not everybody.
No, not like none of the civilians.
Well, not when. So I mean, at some point, firearms are new technology. Like muskets are expensive and difficult to make. It's right now.
Yeah,
this is
because all of the colonialists have them. I'm saying like as a rule. Don't quote me on this, or do quote me on this. Fact check me, everybody. I'm pretty sure the right to bear arms is uniquely American at any time period, right? Even back at the same time where the colonies all had militias and they all had their own weapons, the British public didn't have them. The Indian population didn't have them. Like wherever weapons became prevalent, they are generally controlled by the government. America is pretty unique in that factor.
That's interesting. I'll have to look into that. I've always had the understanding that people carried weapons pretty prevalently back in the day. Even not necessarily just firearms, but weapons in general, right? So even when it was just swords and daggers and shit.
Yeah, but like that would have been nobility. So that would have been like 1% of the population. Like unless you're talking about like I know there was like stuff in there's stuff and now I'm really grossly exaggerating.
Maybe Netflix, is doing me wrong. Maybe these movies about the Middle Ages where everyone has swords hanging off their belts.
The movies aren't about the boring people. They're about all the lords. The 1%, bro.
I'll have to look into it. I've always kind of had the belief in understanding and this. I don't know that it came from a factual place, so I need to do some digging. But that, Yeah,
well, fact check me, and anybody out there in the comments, if you happen to have a little bit of knowledge on this, or I guess Google, just let us know.
So one thing that I thought we should get into though is we talked about the big events, the mass murders, the shootings, and that triggers these conversations. I think it probably triggered the last one we had.
Yeah.
And to kind of go off of your point that you were making, those deaths account for such a minority in overall deaths, but just look at gun deaths. They're like almost statistically worthless to even think about. And the number of gun deaths.
Not that each one of them isn't a tragedy, and that they are.
Yeah, 100%. Like, and from an emotional value, they're the strongest deaths.
Right, and again, as we were saying, for good reason, right? Those are random people, right? Now, I suppose like a drive-by shooting on somebody who's innocent should probably evoke the same response, but it's one or two people. Yeah,
exactly. And I mean, they do like when you think of the movie Titanic, to kind of go back on that philosophy part. You remember him falling off the door, sinking into the water.
Yep.
You don't, and that makes you sad and it makes you upset, but you don't think about the thousands of other people that died on the boat, right? You should be 1,000 more times sad because that many more people died, right? But you're not. And that's just human psyche. And so the same thing applies here, where when you hear about these these emotionally dragging moments, these shootings like this where random people are getting shot for no reason, in mass numbers. It hits much different than what some of the major impacts of guns are. So the data I have pulled up here is just a chart, and it's showing in 2016. I don't know why data is always like 4 years old. Like, does it really take that long to compile?
You really have to do studies for these things. So it's like somebody has to commission something, and it's like expensive, and it takes a while, and you need experts.
But so this one's in 2016. So there were in the U.S. there were 38,658 gun deaths in the U.S. Of those, just under 30,000, so 22,938, were suicides.
Yep.
Right. Now these numbers don't really add up. Oh yeah, they do. Oh, I said 29,000. I'm sorry. I had too many drinks. Apple juice got me. All right. 22,938. Sorry. Okay. The numbers do add up. We're suicides. Right. So 2/3 of them ish were suicides. Of all the gun deaths in the country, 2/3 of them, the person pulled the trigger on themselves, or they were set up by the government to look like suicides.
Right. It was either Clinton or suicide. Got it.
Well, one of the two, right? It was secret conspiracies or actual suicides, but most of them are that. And then you have the other side of it, which were homicides, right? So you have 14,415 of them were homicides. Of those 14,000 homicides, 71 were mass shootings. 71.
Right. And this evokes. So, I mean, I think what we're dancing around is that the call for, let's say specifically the banning of assault rifles or assault weapons, which is a very nebulous and undefined term, it's the calls for that are just outsized. I understand where people are coming from, and they think that their solution will work, but it's just it's not warranted, right? And then maybe the argument is that, well, maybe we could have prevented those 71 deaths. It's like, no, he would have used a pistol, and he would have killed maybe 2 less people, maybe, right? And it's like at that point you're approaching diminishing returns, and you're infringing on my constitutional right, right?
Well, I don't know. Your constitutional right doesn't say you have a right to own an AR-15. It just says to bear arms. It's not specific what kind of arms,
Yeah, so let's just give everybody pea shooters, and then for sort of semantically just reduce the right down to nothing.
Well, if I want to use your logic and flip it around to exactly what you said before, what you don't support is everyone should have a right to own a tank, right? Like,
yeah.
Obviously, at some point you have to draw a line where you say, this is what's safe for the public and not necessary, but makes sense for public ownership, right? Like an AR-15.
Yeah. Well, I'm drawing the line around a semi-automatic long gun, right? Because other than that, sort of armed resistance or armed occupation is just futile.
I mean, so your stance on automatic weapons is it's fine that we aren't allowed to have automatic weapons?
Yeah. I'm okay with the system that we have, which for those of you who don't know how to get an automatic weapon in this country, you basically can't, but you can. There's a really, really strict, I guess it's something like tier 3, or I don't know what it's called, but you can get a very special license, and then you can own an automatic weapon. Yeah, I think it has to be for work, or it has to be for something like maybe like a merchant marine guard or something like that.
You might just be able to keep it at the gun place too. I don't know for sure. I know that the shooting range near my house has an automatic weapon that you can rent and fire in their range.
Look, so and this brings up another thing too. It's like that always really bothers me. It's just like people, gun control advocates, people who do this for a living, members of Congress who are talking about gun control, don't know the difference between automatic and semi-automatic, right? They don't know basic things about the weapons that they're trying to ban, right? Like you'll have there was an anchor on MSNBC, I think, who said the words fully semi-automatic. Like she actually said that in regards to whatever gun debate that was going on at the time. Like the people who want to ban these guns typically have never touched a gun. right? And that's not obviously a ironclad rule, but that is a very strong correlative rule. Like as soon as you've actually been taught how to responsibly handle firearms, for some reason, and I don't actually understand why this is, but when you handle a weapon, suddenly people just flip. It's like an immediate red pill or a gun pill because they don't become Republicans. They're just like, oh, this is a weapon. Oh, this is how hard it is to get a permit. This is what it's like to shoot it. Like suddenly, I don't know what it is. Like they get a respect or I don't know. Like they got dope.
I think you could flip that though. I don't know which way is more true, but I think it's easy enough to say that the reason, and I don't know that this is even true, that most people that are against or that are for gun control, haven't touched a gun. But let's assume that's true. I think the logic could easily be flipped to say the reason they haven't touched a gun is because they don't believe in them. It's right. They want more gun control because they don't believe in guns. They don't believe in guns. They're not going to go out and do it. It's not because
for sure that's true for some of them, or a lot of them think that they're principally opposed to them. But then when they get a friend who's like, "Hey, no, just come shoot it," and they're like, "No, I really don't like guns." It's like, no, I'll walk you through it. Like that's the kind of scenario I'm talking about. Like for some reason, those people like consistently, like I've seen this multiple times. Whole bunch of different YouTube channels where people will do this with people, and for some, like I don't get it. Like it is actually strange, and I'm not asking you to necessarily believe me, but like it's just like every single time it's like people who are staunchly anti-gun and pro-gun control, for some reason they just kind of like wind up, they just relax about the whole thing, and I don't know why. It is weird to me, but I think.
Have you watched the TV show Yellowstone?
No.
There's a scene in that show where there's a guy from California. He's in the Montana, wide open plains, mountains, whatever. And it seems like he's never held a gun before, and he's getting taught how to shoot. And he's doing it for defense. He's kind of in a rough spot, and he thinks someone's going to come get him. But anyway, he's holding the gun, and the guy's showing him how to shoot, and he shoots it, and he empties the clip, and he looks at the guy and goes, "I feel like a god." Right?
Yeah.
Like
it gives you
for anyone that's ever gone out and shot a gun the first time you do it, like right after you do it, like it does give you this feeling like
you're shaking a little bit, but you just shot something. I don't know, like you just put bullet down range and you just messed something up, like you hit that target. I don't know, like I don't know what it is. It's just like it's powerful and exhilarating because I think you're nervous, and then when you do it right and you're not dead at the end of it, like you're just getting dopamine. It's like your body's like, congratulations, you're still alive, like you did well, and then you just like associate that with shooting the weapon. I don't know. I'm speculating.
No, that's how I felt when I got done with my skydive that I did.
Oh man.
Yeah. I'm afraid of heights. I'm afraid of heights.
Then you're like really friendly with everybody because you got this dopamine and
dude, I was it up. So I'm gonna vortex a bit here. I'm gonna tell you a personal story. I as I mentioned, I'm afraid of heights, and it was a friend's birthday, and she wanted to go skydiving for her birthday, and so a group of us were like, "Yeah, we'll do it." So we knew we were going for like 3 months ahead of time, and I had already decided that I only had 3 months to live at that point, and so I'm a big dude also. Like I think I've told you guys, but I'm 6'3". Currently, I'm 280 pounds. I think at the time I was probably 280, 290. And
I could take you.
You could take me as a very possibly. You're much more well trained, I would imagine, than I am.
But I was in the Navy, not the Marines.
But if I end up getting to be able to sit on you, you're fucked. So
yeah, exactly. Like, that's what it always comes down to, man.
If we go to ground game, you're in trouble. So anyway, we get there, and I had to get a special guy to jump with me. His name was Tree Man. So I knew from the Cincinnati area his nickname was Tree Man. I don't know where his name came from, but this guy was maybe like 5 foot tall, maybe. I mean, he's a short guy, and he was tiny, skinny, super small dude. I mean, he had to weigh less than 100 pounds.
Wow.
He was little. And the reason they had to do that is because the parachute has a maximum weight limit of 500 pounds.
Oh, my God.
And then the parachute weighs 50 pounds. And so you add that onto my 300-pound ass, and you don't got a whole lot of room in there for the tandem jumper, right?
So you're just wearing this dude around like a backpack, aren't you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I look like Master Blaster from fucking Mad Max. No shit. So.
Oh my god.
So we're going through the training, going through the class, and you got to watch this video that's basically telling you you're going to die from doing this jump. It's the safety video that they have to show everybody. It's like this could happen and this could happen, and I'm like, yeah, I already know I'm dead. I don't know why I'm wasting this hour of my life. I already know this is the last couple minutes of my life, and I got to spend it watching this piece of shit TV. So we get up there, we jump. When I landed, I guess what I was trying to get to is that rush of dopamine. Right, like I was so afraid of everything. I knew it was in the end. I'm afraid of heights, so it was terrifying. The first thing I did is go up to the head instructor and I said, "How do I do this for a living?" Right, like
yeah,
that was it. Like I was hooked. I wanted to do it. I've not gone jumping again. Gone to jump again. I would. I just I've never done it. Once the drugs wore off, the dopamine. But yeah, so shooting like, a gun.
You get that a lot, though. You get that with a lot of different things, and it's guns, it's skydiving, right? Because when you're there, you get to see, like, you get like a window into the community of skydivers, and they're all like really chill, and they've all got tattoos, and they're like jumping out of these planes, without parachutes and catching them halfway down, and you're like, wow, that's really cool. There's a community I could plug into. It's the exact same thing with the gun community. It's it's like when you start scuba diving, you're like, wow, I could do this. I could learn how to snorkel. Like I could, I don't know. It's like a lot of times, like, I don't know. Like if you go watch somebody do karate and you're like, oh shit, I could do this. I could do this. Like somebody, like when I was getting security training in the Navy, it's like we start getting taught moves, how to take people down. And you're like, oh, this is cool as shit. I should do mixed martial arts or something. I see, it's like, I don't know. You just, I think physically doing things a lot, like, physically doing those hobby type things, getting the rush, being in it, I think that affects people a lot, especially since we've moved as a culture to like a more sedentary lifestyle.
Yeah, me specifically this last year for sure.
Everybody.
I thought this data was interesting.
Yeah, Yemen, huh?
Yeah,
didn't
all crushing it.
Too? Can't we just count that as us?
We are crushing it. Count what?
All Canada? The guns in Yemen, I'm pretty sure they were like supplied by the U.S. government. Oh. So like we can just count that as us.
I mean, we are more than 2 times the number of guns per resident than the next country. And if you look at any of these countries, other than Canada, no, I'd say Finland's pretty. Where's Montenegro?
Isn't that like a European sort of or is that like North African?
Maybe that's what I was thinking. It was North African, but I don't. I thought you were the history and geographical dude, so I was going to ask. But I don't. I don't.
Using after like 1700.
Yeah.
Actually, it's like after the fall of the Roman Empire.
For those of you listening, you can't see this. I pulled up some statistics. It's a top 10 civilian gun owning countries, and it's firearms per 100 residents. The U.S. has 120 firearms per 100 residents. That means everybody in our country owns 1.2 guns on average.
So that's about 360 million guns.
A little bit more, yeah, a little bit more, yeah, like but
400 million.
On average, there's more than enough guns for everybody. Okay, everybody gets one. All right, everybody can have one.
Yeah, you get a gun.
It's already owned by the populace. And Yemen is the next with 52. So 1/2 of their population. There's enough guns for half their population. And it just goes down from there, right? Down into the 30s. And the
right.
Upper
There's
30s.
no other respectable countries on there except for...
Yeah, there's a couple. I mean, it goes Yemen, Serbia, Montenegro, Uruguay, Canada, Cyprus, Finland, Lebanon, and Iceland, right? So, I would argue that Canada and Finland are probably pretty, respectable. I don't know. That's not the right word, but
I know. We're gonna get a lot of hate from that.
Yeah. That's not the right word, but I think people understand what we're trying to say. But also, Canada is a very rural and wild kind of environment.
That's kind of what I was saying. It's kind of like a frontier culture.
Yeah, exactly. And I would imagine, possibly Finland has some of that as well.
Right.
So, and definitely Iceland, I would imagine. So, for a very city civilized, I'm gonna get so much hate for that. Yeah, we are standouts. Let's just say that in the U.S.
Sure.
When it comes to this. So
that's what I'm saying. Like, it's uniquely American. Like, I know you think it's we have disagreement about whether it's an old fashioned thing or it's just that it's uniquely American, but I mean, that shows it to be, I would say, uniquely American.
Yeah,
I've got some stats too. So I mean, we were talking a little bit earlier. We were talking about how people assume the race of the of mass shooters, and this is actually this number that I have here. I have a chart about the sort of the breakout of what are the typical ethnicities of people who commit mass shooting, and I heard that I heard that this was actually a little different. I'm not sure what the difference in methodology was, but we have 66% of mass shooters are white. Then it's 21 for black people. Then it's 10 Latino, 8 Asian, 5 other, and then 9 unknown, which actually kind of confuses me. Like, what do you mean unknown?
Yeah. First off, they should have switched the 9 and the 2. It should be unknown and then other.
Yeah,
that is driving me nuts looking at that chart.
I don't know. Is this alphabetized? No, it's not. I don't get it. So that's probably actually that's about a little bit more typical of the narrative than you would expect, right? Because there are not 66% white people in the country. I think it's closer to 50%. And oddly enough, 50% was the stat I heard before, but this was the data I could find. And then you have second place for mass shootings. It's 21% black people, which is a little bit, again, outsized of the population. There's about 14% black people in the United States. So that's like I just Googled it. Jugal. For those you don't know, I say Jugal instead of Google. I don't know. It's just a thing. You say gigawatt.
Gigawatt, yeah.
Gigabyte.
It's 60.7% is the white population.
Oh, okay. So that's actually not too outsized at all. So it looks like whites and blacks are doing a little bit too much mass shooting, and I would assume I don't know the distribution for Latino, Asian, and other. I would assume that's it. Probably that the rest is they underperform in their mass shooting duties. So even so, it's like the narrative that, and I've actually fallen prey to this narrative. Like, I thought this was true. The narrative that mass shooters are young, angry white men, and that that's just the trend. Apparently, that's not true, right? I mean, it is 66% of the shooters, but like Tim just said, white people are 60% of the population. So it's like there is.
I'd like to see the breakdown of male versus female.
It's going to be like what? It's going to be 99% or 100%.
Probably, yeah.
Like, I don't even think anybody bothers studying that, like, because obviously.
It doesn't have to be obvious, but yeah, I don't know that I've ever heard of a female. This is not a call to arms for you females out there, okay? Let's leave this stat where it's at. But yeah, like, why? Why men versus females?
Well, I mean, there's obviously temperamental differences between men and women. We'll have somebody on to talk about that. I honestly, I
can get Jordan Peterson on. Give him a call.
Oh my God. Can you imagine? I wouldn't be able to say anything, man. I'd just be fanboying the whole time. You would have to I'd have to hand you a list of questions.
Yeah, no problem. I could do it.
Yeah.
No worries there.
Before I get started on the questions, Nathan wanted to let you know that he's a real big fan and he loves your work and he's been following you since 2016. Okay. All right. Here we go. Okay. So I had this other thing and I'm scrolled all the way the heck down on here. There was another thing too. I guess this will be the last topic, and then we can move over to the BS philosophy segment, the big idea that I want to talk about tonight. It's actually kind of related to this stuff because almost everything is related to this. But so for this last point that I have, Donald Trump made a claim that 98% of mass public shootings have occurred where guns are bans or gun-free zones. And I dug down into this fact checking article, and it's like he's mostly correct. It certainly is true that a lot of them do, right? I would say it's more than half, right? Because there's two different studies on this, and like one of them's like, well, 8% of mass shootings happen in gun-free zones, and then this other one's like 98%. And the difference between the two of them is obviously it's how they define. It's the era of data that they use, and then it's how they define mass shooting. And I think the colloquial, the way that we think about mass shootings, where it's like, what is it, for example? Like if you weed out gang shooting, if you weed out, I'm trying to remember, but there was a whole bunch of things where it's like, well, the guy who said 98% is actually, he's looking at the scenarios that we think of as mass shootings, right? It's they both say 4 or more people, but they disagree on some other stuff, and so I feel like the other guy was kind of like he was lumping stuff into it on purpose because like he put gang shootings in there, he put a whole bunch of other stuff that we don't actually consider the type of
for people listening, like when he says areas where guns are banned, like a mall is that place. You're not allowed to bring a gun into the mall when you go in there, right?
Government buildings.
So, but it's kind of an unfair comparison in one way. I mean, I get the point. What they're trying to say is, by not allowing people to bring guns into these places doesn't stop these mass shootings, right?
Correct.
But on the other hand, does it stop other violence, which is much more prevalent than mass shootings, right? And all these areas, they're defined as one thing, and they're public places where a lot of people are.
Those are places with lots of people in them.
Yeah, and that's why people go there to do mass shootings. It's not like, oh, hey, this place doesn't allow anyone else to have guns here, so I'm going to go here and shoot people. It's because I want to shoot a lot of people. There's a lot of people here.
Right, and it's a gun-free zone. So I suppose my argument wouldn't be against. So look, there is some evidence that some mass shooters have deliberately bypassed. For example, the guy who shot up the movie theater for Batman, the guy who shot up the movie theater during that, he went past 2 movie theaters that were not gun-free zones, and he went to the one that was a gun-free zone. Right, and that's speculation, and I'm not even really going to hinge my argument on that point. I would just say that. I know that you just said that, does it stop other violence? But it's certainly having...
It might not. I don't know. Right.
We'd have to look into those statistics. But having a gun-free zone is going to prevent law-abiding... 100%, it will prevent law-abiding citizens from bringing their weapons in. Right? And so now you are guaranteeing that if somebody does bring a weapon, you are at their mercy.
I saw a speech from, I forget I think she was a senator. She was in politics at some point, and I want to say maybe in Texas. And she was involved in a shooting at a restaurant that ended up with her parents being killed, I think. And she was saying that, she was in a spot in the restaurant where when the guy, started shooting people up or whatever, she would have had a clean shot, and she would have had a place to set her arm on to be able to maintain that clean shot and whatever. And she said, but I didn't have my gun with me because I was more worried about not losing my license than protecting my life. And so I think that goes to the point you're trying to make, which is, by taking the guns away from those who follow the rules in these situations, when there is an event that happens, they can't be there to.
Yeah. And this is an important point, right? So definitionally speaking, you are stripping the weapons away from the people who are following the rules, right? The only people who are going to listen to your gun-free zone are the people who you want to be armed, right? Or who you won't mind being armed because they are following the rules, right? And they are rule followers, generally speaking. So
yeah, to kind of flip it a little bit, I guess, a big part of, in my opinion, of why we have these gun-free zones is because of reaction, right? Like overreaction. In public areas, you're more likely to have an interaction with another person that just sets you off, triggers you. think of road rage when you're driving, right? And you make irrational decisions, and it's possible that you
true inside and outside of gun-free zones.
It is, but it's more likely when you're around more people. And most of the gun-free zones are very populated, crowded areas. I think the other part of the gun-free zone,
the type of person who listens to your gun-free zone law is not going to be the person who's getting into a public fight like that.
No, so, I'm not going to say who it is in my life, but a person that I know usually carries loaded weapons in their vehicle, and in this particular instance, I think they were driving their wife's car or something and got into some road rage and whatever. And he literally told me, he's like, if I would have been in my car, I would have shot that guy. And he puts his weapon away when he pulls up to a restaurant or somewhere that says no weapons. He takes it off, puts it in the glove box, locks it. He's responsible with this stuff. But he had an emotional reaction, and he remembers specifically reaching for, trying to get a weapon because he wanted to go shoot the guy. He was that pissed. And road rage is its own beast, right? So that's a different.
Yeah, it really is. Hey man, let's start a GoFundMe. We'll get him some therapy.
Yeah, but the point is, it is a thing where you have to worry about emotional reaction. Like we showed, the biggest part of guns, gun deaths in this country is suicide.
Yeah.
So it got me thinking, the argument, I guess, against that would be if I wanted to commit suicide and I didn't have a gun available, I would just find another method, right?
Right. The left's argument is that the other methods, and this isn't without merit, their argument is that the other methods are less effective, which they are. Which is, you see that disparity in that men are twice as likely to commit suicide. Women are actually, I think, that's a weird statistic. I think they're twice as likely than that to actually attempt suicide, right? So women attempt suicide far more often, but they use less lethal means like pills. But men go right to the gun because we're aggressive. So the left's argument is that if there's not the gun in the home, the people will die less.
There could be some of that. I was actually curious, is there any statistical relevance between the number of guns owned in an area, number of people that own a gun, whatever, and suicide rate? Or is it true? There should be no correlation at all, right? If you're just going to find another means to do it. If you wanted to commit suicide and you didn't have a gun, then you would use another means. So you would think there would be literally no correlation.
Very good. I think there's regionally. Well, show me what you're going to show me. I'll see if I think it.
Okay, so the top. So for those of you just listening, sorry about your luck because there's a lot of data in these graphs. But basically, the top one is a picture of the United States. Darker colors are higher gun ownership, and lighter colors are lighter gun ownership. And then the bottom one is the darker colors are higher suicide deaths, and the lighter colors are lower suicide deaths. And looking at it, there's not really a direct correlation. It doesn't immediately pop out, and you're not like, obviously it's lined up. So, and that was my first thought when I saw it. I was like, okay, so it doesn't look like it's that correlated. And then I started reading through the names and looking at the colors, and then I read the little clip up here, and there's definitely some correlation between them, and it's pretty strong if you start looking at.
Yeah, if you actually just factor out the Southwest, it's a fairly strong correlation.
Yeah, exactly, and these states kind of set it apart, and they say the 9 states that rank the lowest in terms of gun prevalence are the very same 9 that rank the lowest for suicide rates. And the 3 top states for gun prevalence are 3 of the 4 highest suicide rates. So the more guns, the more people kill themselves. The less guns, the less people kill themselves at the extremes. And then in the middle, when you look, it actually lines up fairly well as well.
Yeah,
it's not a pure thing.
I'm going to say, like, again, I'm going to point out correlation and causation. I mean, there's a decent, there is a decent correlation there, but like, correlation doesn't prove causation. I would say that this could be a thing where, it's like, for example, it's like people were pointing out, like, here's where COVID is and here's where the 5G towers are. It's like, therefore,
yeah,
5G causes COVID, right? Or something like that, right? But it just turns out that, the 5G towers are where population is, right? So something like that, especially with that massive disparity where the Southwest there is just black, or it's the darkest color for, what is that? Suicidality.
Suicides. Yeah.
Yeah. I think there may be, like, for example, there could be correlations with wealth. There could be correlations with population density. There could be altitude. Like, look at that. There's up in the mountains, people are committing suicide. What's up with you guys, huh?
Well, I mean, they even say it in this article. They say, both gun ownership and suicide rates are influenced by poverty, population density, and crime level.
Smart.
So I agree. I think there's a lot of other things at play. And I would be interested, and I'll have to do some more digging. Maybe I'd be interested to see if there's some other, explanation for why there's a correlation between gun ownership and suicide rate. Because in the example you gave, right, people are making a false correlation between number of COVID deaths and 5G towers, but there's a clear alternate explanation, right? So, what is the alternate explanation here? If there is no causational correlation, and it's just a random correlation, why is it that way, right? You should then be able to point to another reason, and I can't think of one, offhand.
No, I honestly suspect, and we should move on because we're the last half hour here. I suspect there is causation there. I do, right? Because again, it is known that the difference in suicide success between men and women is the different tools that they use, right? Pills versus weapons. And I think it's a pretty obvious fact to me that at least to some degree, the fact that a weapon is available means that your suicide attempt is likely to be more successful in those states because more people just have access to the firearm. So
yeah,
I've been surprised before, but I would kind of be surprised if there was not some causative relation.
I don't think that I think that there's definitely validity to that, and that could be all or a large part of the correlation, but that doesn't remove the importance of gun control, right? Like, if having access to a more lethal way of attempting suicide results in more suicides, then removing that access is beneficial. If we believe as a whole that suicide is something that is, not a good thing, that is done in the heat of the moment, is an emotional, passionate response that most people regret later, like those types of things, right? So if we want to work on preventing suicide, and it turns out that having access to a gun greatly increases your success rate at suicide, then the argument is easy to make to say we need to remove access to guns for that reason. And I guess the whole reason I wanted to get to that point is we start talking about gun control because of the emotional impact that these mass shootings have. But we should really spend time digging into the actual impact that gun ownership has on our populace and using that as a reason to decide if we should have better gun control or not. And I don't think that removing automatic weapons is going to affect suicide rates, right? That wouldn't make no sense at all. You need, semi-automatic. Yeah, I should have just said assault rifles, which is what my brain was thinking, but my mouth did not put out there.
Right.
It doesn't matter if it's an assault rifle. You do it with a handgun or shotgun or whatever, right? But the point is, like, there's a correlation. So let's look at it, and there's other correlations too when it comes to gun ownership and homicide rate buy a gun, which makes sense. If you get angry at somebody,
it does.
Yeah, you get angry at somebody, you want to shoot them, and there's a gun available, they're more likely to get shot than if you didn't have a gun available, right? Like, it makes sense there. So,
that doesn't really explain why homicide's higher in the cities where the gun control's the tightest.
There's going to be some anomalies, and you got to look at crime rates.
That's a trend. That's a very clear trend. So the cities are more violent than the country.
Yeah, they're also more populous dense, and that drives emotional.
Per capita.
That's what I'm saying. Like, per capita, road rage happens more when you have a crowded highway than a wide open highway.
No. That wouldn't be per capita. That'd be the other thing. That would be in total.
No, I'm saying per capita.
All right.
I'm saying
true. Yes. It's yes. Yeah. It's like putting two uranium rods near each other. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, all right. We're gonna do a little philosophy segment with me, Nathan, the right wing host on the show. What I wanted to talk about tonight, on the surface, I don't think it sounds really boring. So, like, if everybody's like tired and they're ready to check out, just hear us out for a couple of seconds. Okay. So here's my idea. Right. So I think that as a powerful lens for looking at the left, right, the Democrats, the left-wing movements, whatever the sort of the id of the left is today, I think a powerful lens that you can use when examining them is to say the left is driven today by reducing harm, right? And so what I mean by that is that almost all of their policies can be sort of boiled down to what they're attempting to do is to reduce the harm of a situation. And I can give you some examples, right? So let's just take some things. Like I just grabbed a whole bunch of stories, so like cultural stories off of the internet, and you can do it for like almost any story that you pick up that's from the progressive left that's pushing something forward. And then you can say, oh yeah, there's harm reduction in this, right? So if we take a look at this, like this is just a stupid article about some guy's daughter was playing with a deck of cards, and the daughter said, "Dad, why is the king more powerful than the queen?" Right? And so the whole story is about the dad's like, "Oh, there is no reason, you're right." And then he like makes his own deck, and it's called it's something weird. It's like queen. It's where the queen is more powerful. But the point of this is that there's an element in here, and that element is that the father saw that the fact that the king was placed over the queen in the cards, even if it was a marginal effect and it was something that she honestly would have forgotten about in about a day, honestly a minute. She's a kid, she's a tiny kid, right? She would have forgotten about that and never thought about it again. But that tiny amount of distress that it caused his daughter and potentially other daughters, he thought, oh, I got to mitigate this harm, right? This small amount of harm, the harm that's inflicted by having a king over a queen, right? Because that would be patriarchal oppression, right? So he's going to take that harm and he's going to mitigate it. And so he's going to make a deck that has queens over kings, right? And it's going to make her feel good. It's going to make her feel better. And the harm is going to be mitigated. Here's a tweet from AOC. We need to cover 100% of the cost of the uninsured and underinsured people right now, right? So you think about the left's push for healthcare, right? Universal healthcare. This is a fundamentally harm-reducing argument. It's if you disagree with this, why do you want people to die? You want people to die? Like, I don't understand why you're against this, right? We can reduce the harm. All we need to do is take money from all the billionaires and make a national system where nobody falls through the cracks anymore and no harm is done anymore, right? Nobody's going to go without, like, nobody's going to be exposed to all of these various different ailments without coverage, right? Reducing harm. It's healthcare again. But like you can anything that the left is doing, anything that the modern left is doing, take any cultural issue that they're pushing. It's generally oh, you remember a couple years back, I don't know if you know about this, microaggressions, right? That the idea that small actions could be considered actual harm, right? This is actually the quintessential example where the far left is saying that microaggressions are actual harm. the left is very big into anti-bullying. There's don't be fat phobic, don't be ableist, don't be like, reduce all the differences between people, because if you say one thing, one person or what one person is or what they're doing is better than the other person, there is discomfort experienced by these other people who either can't or won't become that thing. The welfare, right? Any of the social programs, you're reducing harm. Sentencing reduction, right? They're trying to get people. I saw a tweet from AOC where she was like, I support removing the prison population by 50%. And what she's trying to do there is reduce harm that she thinks was generated through systemic oppression against black people. The left has two terms: silence is violence and speech is violence, right? So your speech can be violence, but also not speaking up on behalf of people is violence, right? And so we've turned up the sensitivity dial for what violence is, right? And the left is sort of intent on eradicating it. So with that baseline, right? Thinking about safe spaces in universities, what do you think about that, Tim? And I have a couple other things to say.
I'm curious, can you give me some examples of Republican policies whose goals are to increase harm?
Increase harm. I would say no, and I'm working through this as I'm talking. I would say no, but I don't think that they're driven from a desire to reduce harm. Right. And so I suppose this actually goes into the next part, is what I would actually call it. It's not that it's, I think they both actually are trying.
Do you think that the Republican approach to abortion and saying that we shouldn't allow it is not from an approach to reduce harm to that child?
No, that absolutely is an approach to reduce harm.
Yeah. So my counter argument, I asked two kind of loaded questions there, but my counter argument is all policies in general are there to reduce harm.
Yeah, I mean that's a pretty good point. I still have an argument here for what the difference is between the two, but I suppose that would be the end goal. I'm trying to think of some sort of exception where it's that's not the case. I'll keep thinking.
You got double boomed in chat, by the way.
Yeah, did I? Well, let me say this then. All right, so let me try to save a little bit of face here. So I would argue then we'll push it a step further. We'll say I think the problem, right? It's a problem from my point of view. I think the problem with the modern left is that they are pushing the harm reduction to infantilizing levels. Right. So, for example, like a lot of the things that I put out there, microaggression, like don't be fat phobia, don't be this phobia, don't be that phobia, like all of it is not all of it, but much of it is far overblown. Like, for example, okay, so we'll talk about the microaggressions, right? So the idea is that if you say things that cause distress, that is actual harm, right? They have essentially redefined harm to include the sort of like idea harm. And this was a big thing. This is why we had to put trigger warnings and stuff, right? This is why the left really pushed for those kinds of things, because it's like, it's kind of started out with a good idea, right? Where, you don't want to trigger somebody with actual legitimate PTSD, right? So you want to put a trigger warning in there. But then it became like all of these college students with really soft heads and a million genders and the inability to confront an idea that disagreed with them. It became for them primarily, right? They can't handle these ideas that question their existence or question the existence of their friends, or like sort of go against their narrative. So I don't know. What do you think about that? A little better, a little clearer?
I mean, I knew what you were saying, but I guess I'll throw you a bone here a little bit. I would be somewhat on board with the argument that conservative views generally are more aligned with maintaining our level of freedom versus potential harm, right? Yes. Generally, new policies being pushed by either side are to reduce harm. That like none of us are like, hey, you know what? We are too damn safe. We need we need to start putting landmines down once every mile in the middle of the highway, right?
Yeah,
like,
right.
That doesn't happen. So yeah, we're always trying to reduce harm. But
actually, I think that's not the point. I don't think that's the point of the right. I'll actually argue against it now.
What,
so
to reduce harm?
Yeah, well, yeah. So they're not going to be necessarily arguing for increasing harm. I think what they will be doing that's different, right? Since they're not driven by reducing harm, what they are driven by is principled, sort of a principle adherence to the way things are, and that's not just.
It's a different definition of harm. They feel like they're being quote unquote they're being harmed. Okay, so let's stick to gun control, right? The people that want to maintain current gun situations feel like it's harming them by taking away their right to guns, right? They want to they
sort of, but there's actual physical harm. It's right, like you take somebody's weapon away, then they can't defend themselves.
Yeah.
So there is an element of harm reduction.
The point stands. Like, I mean, most of the other stuff is physical harm. The point stands. Both sides are working towards what they feel is best for everyone to try and reduce harm, to give us the most freedoms to do whatever, right? A good balance between the two.
Let me try to drive a wedge in there then. Let me try to explain the difference, right? So I think the example that you gave is within a sort of a reasonable realm of public discourse, right? Where there's on one side we probably can save some lives or maybe not, right? And there's the debate there, right? And so there's two actual good harm reduction arguments there. The problem is that again, I'm gonna use the word infantilizing, right? So specifically in the example of the college kids, right, where they had safe spaces, they had the concept of microaggressions, they had don't be transphobic, don't be this phobic, don't be that phobic, right? All of these things that are designed to overprotect the kids, right? And that's actually kind of what I'm getting at is overprotection, right? So it's kind of like the idea that the helicopter parent who's always hovering over the kid, who always catches them before they fall, never lets them make any of their own mistakes, never lets them get exposed to things that will shape them, that will ultimately shape them, right? They'll never get cut on a knife because you'll never let them have a pocket knife. They'll never shoot their foot because they don't ever get a BB gun, and they won't learn responsibility. They won't learn this. That's kind of what I'm getting at. Where the right is not advocating for stuff that will harm you necessarily. They're advocating for the things that will harm you to the correct level, right? The things that won't kill you, but the things that are good for you, right? Either behaviorally as an individual or as a society.
To that doesn't kill you, make you stronger, and you need to be stronger, so you need to experience some of these negative things in life.
Yes.
So I think that you can look historically, and this goes back to our conversations we've had about progressive thinking versus conservative thinking. And you can see historically that it's always been the case where let's go back to women's rights, right? The people that are fighting against women's rights, against improving all of those things for women, they weren't trying to harm women. They just felt like the situation was good enough, right?
Yeah, but where's the harm reduction on the left there? I don't know if that's necessarily a 1-for-1.
It's 100% harm reduction, right? Being silenced or being controlled or not having a voice in politics, not being able to vote, all these things.
I suppose that's an abstract harm, I guess, but it's not really. It's not even. I suppose like that would fit in the definition of a microaggression by today's.
And how is that level of harm different than the word that you use to
discomfort?
Hold on. Right? How is that kind of harm not being able to be represented in your government? Let's just use that one as an example. Not having the right to vote. How is that different than the trans arguments that are going on right now, or the gay arguments that are going about like their ability to be in the military, right? Like if you're gay and you can't be in the military, that isn't physical harm. It's a mental distress. It's very similar to not being able to vote for women, right?
It's a mental distress, yeah. The difference would be the efficacy of the argument, right? For those, we don't really have time to get into why it is or is not a good idea to have trans people in the military, but the arguments against that are efficacy. They are they are. If I had to boil it down really quick for people, because we don't have time to get into this, but basically, gender dysphoria is a condition that has suicidality attached to it. Right? It's not just incidental. There's a very high suicidality rate with trans individuals. And the reason why the U.S. government under Trump didn't want them in the military was not because he hates trans people. It's because there's high suicidality, and we don't let people with anxiety into the military, let alone people who are highly suicidal. That's part of it. There's more to it than that. So for example, that is a different argument. But even in saying that there's a good example in there for the harm reduction on the left. Like, they want to reduce the mental distress of trans people through eliminating the discrimination and allowing them into the military. And the problem is that the conservatives, I suppose, they're not advocating for harm, but what they are doing is going for the proper amount of hurt that makes the better outcome, which is that, sorry, you can't come in here, or you can't serve in the military because you are much more likely to commit suicide, right? Because if you couple the trans community's suicidality, which is about 40%, with veteran suicidality, you're really just asking this person to die, right? And so by keeping them out, it doesn't seem like a compassionate argument because Republicans can't articulate this, but it is actually in the end probably going to save lives, right? So that
it's to do less harm. So I want to make one thing clear, because I think there may be some confusion on where I stand on this. My argument isn't that the left isn't doing this. My argument is that everybody's doing this, right? And the reason I say that is because in chat, one of our viewers, had said that they thought I kind of missed the point, and that they agreed more with you, and they said that they said, let me read it for them. It says, most of what I hear talked about or pushed for by the left is about putting white padding on the walls and bubble wrapping everyone.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm trying to say.
And I agree with that. I'm not saying I agree with that. I think that, for those of you that know me,
tell me the Republicans are doing that.
They are not.
Exactly.
Right? They're not doing that, right? And I do not think that they're equal. But to your original argument, which was, the lens we should look at the left through is they're trying to reduce harm. My counter to that is everybody is.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a good lens.
Yeah. Probably. I think
is the point I was trying to get to.
So let me rephrase it then, right? So I guess my whole lens, it needed a little bit more polishing before I put it out there. I think right there, absolutely.
It wasn't quite the Hubble telescope
exactly.
level of polish.
No, it was. Did you know that the lens in the Hubble telescope was flawed when they put it up? Wait, is that why you said that? Am I telling you something you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let me try to restate it then. Okay. So I will say that a problem on the left is overprotecting and infantilization, right? Protecting people from their consequences. A good example of this would be the child welfare policies that are designed to protect single mothers from poverty, right? So it's if you're a single mother and you have kids, you get paid more for having those kids, but only if you're a single mother, right? If there's a father in the household, you get the standard rates, right? And so that's a quintessential leftist policy, right? Because we want to help single mothers, and that is a compassionate thing to do. And the right's argument against that is that has a sort of a societal infantilization, right? This actually ends up driving up the single motherhood rates, right? Because if there's a man in the house, they're about to lose a whole bunch of money. So what ends up happening is that the perverse incentive is that you have just a skyrocketing single motherhood rate, and in the end, the policy that was designed to help single mothers ends up hurting them.
Right? I would want to dig into that more and see how much more do they get compared to what the average income is for husbands and things because if it's a massive amount of money increase, then there's going to be incentive there to get rid of the man in the house. But if it's not that much more compared to what another person in the house's income would bring in, then that's one thing. And the other thing is, if the man doesn't have a job and he's not supporting the family and you get rid of him because you can get more money by getting him out, he needed to get a job.
Yeah, no, I mean it could be, but I mean still that the mechanism is there. I'm sure, absolutely look into it. That is a common argument. I'm only just kind of like saying this is the common argument on the right. It's kind of like a quintessential.
I mean, it boils down to the very common, if we want to keep using that word, argument that goes back and forth on almost all these social policies, which is this policy is better. It helps the people that need it. And then the counter argument is, yeah, but the people that need it can abuse it and will because of X, Y, and Z human nature, right? And so the bottom line is, yeah, people understand that there will be abuse of this policy, but the idea is that in general, it's a net positive for society.
Well, that's your idea.
No. The idea of the people that support any particular policy. I'm not trying to defend any one individual right now. I'm just talking in general, right? Like their reasoning behind it is because it's not that they're oblivious to the potential abuse. It's not like you're enlightening them by saying this may, this may entice some woman to kick a man out of the house, right? It's that they understand that most likely and feel like, okay, yeah, that's going to happen sometimes, but the net is a positive.
Yeah.
And there's everything is like that in life. To get off of politics for a second, when we were pregnant with our first kid, I was talking to a friend of mine who had kids for a couple of years prior, and we were talking about the difference of being a parent and all of that. And he was an engineer with me back in the day, and he gave it to me in a very engineering-ish way. He said, look, the amplitude of your highs and lows, right, are much wider.
Yeah.
So, that what that means is for those of you that don't get the word amplitude, your average or your highs and your lows are much higher and much lower on a daily basis. You're much happier sometimes than you used to be, and you're much worse off, pissed, angry, tired, whatever it is, than you used to be.
Man, leave it to engineers.
But your average is higher, right? So the whole wave, even though in any given day, the range between your happiness and sadness is bigger, your average has moved up. On average, you're much happier, right? And so, having kids has side effects. It has negative effects, and it increases your happiness as well. And on average, it's a net positive, right? And so the same thing can kind of apply to a lot of these policies. The people believe that yes, there's going to be additional people taking advantage of the situation, but it's also going to increase other people's situations some significant amount upwards.
Right.
And the thought is that the net movement is up, right?
Yeah. So you're speaking to, so you're actually, and I think you're doing this subconsciously because you do have some ground to stand on when you do this, but you're bringing it back to the debates that are actually classically already in the public sphere. Right, these predate the sort of modern progressive movements. We've been talking about how to properly balance welfare versus non for a very long time at this point.
So give me an example. Give me one, maybe one you already said that isn't clicking in my head, but whatever. Just give me anything random. One modern progressive point that fits this narrative that you're saying, and let's see if we can make it apply.
Honestly, it's anything that was on college campus 4 years ago, and it's kind of like leaking out into the stratosphere here. But again, like safe spaces, right? And the idea of a safe space, for those who don't know, on college campuses, the idea of a safe space is that this is a room into which you can go where nothing in the outside world can touch you. You don't have to hear any nasty Republicans' opinions. You don't have to hear, you can just go into this room and exist, and you don't have to be bothered. And there's like TVs up in the corner with puppies playing, and there's there's like Legos, and there's like, it's like literally infantilizing people. But these became pretty prominent back when I was in college. People would say, for example, Ben Shapiro would come speak on the campus, and then people would just flock to the safe space room just because Ben Shapiro was speaking on their campus. Right? These college age kids literally ended up being literally infantilized. Like they couldn't handle these the strain, the mental strain of having a speaker who opposed them on the campus. And they would go there, and the faculty would send in counselors to talk, if anybody needs counseling, lead them in a kumbaya session. It's like, it's very, very overprotective and infantilizing.
So I would argue in that case, not that I believe this, but the argument from the people that are...
I know it's unbelievable, but you better believe it, man. I'm not lying.
No, that's not what I mean. I mean, I'm not taking a side on this,
Gotcha.
on if it's a good thing or bad thing. So not that I believe that it's a good thing, right? I'm just making the argument that the people that put this in place understood that this, I would imagine, understood that for some people, this type of protection, this type of environment is going to limit their thick-skinnedness, right? Their ability to deal with some of the harshnesses of the world that are going to come in the future. I can't imagine that wasn't thought about when these things started happening, but they probably believed also that for those that truly need it, those people that really needed a place to go and couldn't function very well, that this may save a life, right? Somebody that might have committed suicide, now they had this place they could go and feel safe, they could decompress for a minute, whatever, right? So the feeling is that it's a net positive, right?
Yep.
And so, kind of to the point of like, why is harm reduction a bad thing? If something's a net reduction in harm, and what your argument on this particular case is, it sounds like, is that you believe it's a net addition to harm.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. So I definitely stated my original premise incorrectly.
Yeah, so I don't think that your argument against the left is that they're trying to reduce harm. Because obviously, right? You're not like, hey, we need more harm in this world. Right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, kind of, right? How are you going to grow calluses if you're not running on the pebbles?
Not net harm. What you're saying is
correct,
right? Like net harm. This is worse.
Yeah. For example, when I was young, I heard about a guy who he just spent hours and hours every single day swinging a crowbar at his forearm until eventually this area right here was like literally the bone was reinforced. There were calluses. He had calluses like an inch thick. Till eventually this guy could literally just take just crowbar swings to the arm. Right? He could.
Yeah, the Shaolin monk do that crap.
Right. Exactly. So that the point there would be is that you need to be exposed to a lot of the things that the left is trying to protect people from in order to grow, right? And this like there's a reason why the right is the right and the left is the left, but like it's all thematically joined together. It's, teach a man to fish, feed him for forever, give him a fish, that kind of stuff.
So to look at this from a higher level perspective, maybe, do we need to be that way? Right? Like, do we need to... If you look at our generation,
yeah,
and you compare it to the generation of the people that founded this country in general, right?
Yep.
We couldn't deal with it.
No.
Right?
Not as we are.
Like we don't have the willpower, that we're not used to that hard of work. Like, we don't have the conditioning, exactly. And we don't need it. Our society, our existence, our level of living, we don't need it. It's not important anymore. And so the argument may be that what the progressive push is towards what we're going to need in the future.
Yeah,
like we don't need to be...
That's an interesting argument, maybe even like science fiction-y, like way in the future. I've actually read some books like that.
And I'm not saying I believe this. This is just for a discussion point, right?
Like, I'm just going to say we are 100% not there, right? Because for like the example that I gave you, they needed the room because a conservative speaker was speaking. And again, I'm not exaggerating. Like, so, and that indicates to me. So what I'm saying there is that there is a reasonable expectation of how you need to be able to operate in the world, and they're just not meeting it. In that case specifically, right? And to the degree, okay, so to be fair to the leftists, like, again, there are some good arguments. We can go back and forth on welfare for all day, but to the degree that it's over infantilizing, like the examples I gave, that's kind of what I'm getting at. That's kind of what I'm opposed to. I'll debate all the other stuff with you at any point, but the stuff where it's
I'm trying to stick on the philosophy side of it, because if we get on the actual topic, me and you are going to be in agreement, right? I am all about my true belief is no one is responsible for how you feel other than yourself. Like,
yeah, and they're not. Yeah,
I should be able to say whatever the hell I want, and if it hurts your feelings, that's on you. It's not on me.
right.
You decided to let what I say get under your skin, right? You decided to let that happen. It's not about me.
Virtue. It's just not being taught as a virtue anymore. It's, I guess I sound like a grandpa. I am.
Yeah, that's how I feel. So, like I said, I agree with you on a lot of the points that these things are ridiculous. But to stick on the philosophy side, I don't necessarily agree philosophically about it.
Listen, I stated it wrong. It was bad. So I think it's interesting to note. It's interesting to note that everybody does harm reduction. It's just what the right seems to be playing the longer game in the examples we brought up,
or they can't see the long game. Right.
Okay. So, and you're saying maybe science fiction wise, look, man, I'm telling you, those kids are not functioning well. So I don't know what kind of long game it could possibly be, but those kids are not doing too well.
Look, my kids are young. Who knows how they're going to turn out? But I know, as a soon to be parent, we were reading all these books, very left books. Generally, the parenting books are very, very protective, liberal, all that stuff. And I mean, it was like no screen time. You can't do screen time. You have to do this. You have to do that. All these things. And because of COVID, because of life circumstances, whatever, our kids are in front of screens all the time. I mean, multiple hours a day at least. We're trying to work from home. Either my wife or I'm at home every day trying to work while the kids are here. So we're trying to take care of them and work, which we can't do without them being locked in and entertained.
Yeah.
So, but one of the biggest arguments was lack of imagination, right? Lack of creativity, lack of motor skills, all of these things. Like, they're just sitting there watching TV. Your brain's just, you're not thinking. My son is extremely creative. He just comes up with stories upon stories. Like, my wife sits down with them before they go to bed, and we used to read them books all the time, and now they just sit down and make up a story. They don't read a book; they make one up themselves, and he loves it. And he's amazing at it. Like, he's 3 years old, and they were making up a story, and I don't remember what the protagonist was or whatever. But my wife said, "Where are they?" And he said, "They're at the abandoned mine over by the broken lake." Right? Like,
wow.
Like what?
That's
He's
crazy.
Fucking 3 years old. So, and he has an imaginary friend that used to live nearby and now has moved far away and lives in another country, and like very imaginative mind, and he's very creative, and you watch him play with his toys, and he's like so just because we think something is going to be negative doesn't mean it actually is. And it could be a benefit for them. They could actually be more creative because they're getting so much more stimulation than what you can get from the older toys and from our old methods. Right?
Yeah. Okay. So look. So I mean, your point is that right? Yeah. And there's a lot of good stories like that. Like you get to read funny articles about how in the was it like the turn of the century when kids were moving towards pencils and away from chalk, and then some guy was like, "Well, kids are not going to know how to use a chalk and slate board when they get older if they start to keep using pencils." And it's like, yeah, we know. that's the point,
like,
man.
They're not teaching cursive anymore in schools.
Correct. Right. So and that's where the progressives win, and they're correct, right? That's the job of the left, is to prevent us from going stale and holding on to stupid old ideas. And that's when they're doing it right. And obviously my contention is most of the stuff we talked about today, they're doing wrong. So
well, I know, but I think the interesting point is you look at these things and all of the things that happened in the past that are now absolutely clear. You're like, yeah, those were the good things we changed. But I don't know of many forward-looking policies that we've talked about that are progressive that you agree with at this point. Although some of them are going to be correct at some point, and so maybe we should have that discussion sometime. I'd like to just talk about some of the left policies you really agree with and why. We should definitely do that sometime. Yeah, I was thinking about that. Hey, everybody, maybe someday we'll do an episode where I will be the progressive. I will do my best to blue pill Tim. I'll
I'll turn him straight up into a social justice warrior.
I mean, to be fair, like I'm tinted blue. If you look at my political testing that we did, right? Like, if it was a scale of 0 to 100 and 50 being dead center, and 100 being all the way left, I think I'd probably be like a 55. Right, like I was slightly leaning left on those.
57.
57.
All right.
I'll do 56. I'll give you the 56.
All right, okay. 56 and a half. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching tonight. I really love it when you guys throw the comments in there. I can see Tim cackling up a storm over there. So, like I said again, if you weren't here in the beginning, Chris he's on sabbatical right now. So he's got a lot of things going on. He's doing a whole bunch of good stuff. He's moving to a new house, and he's got stuff going on. So we wish him the best. He's not going to be with us for about another month or so, maybe a month and a half. And we'll keep you updated. And so with that.
Well, so one last thing you mentioned at the beginning, I don't want to leave him hanging on it. Name change.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So long story short, we came up with this name on our own creatively. We liked it a lot. We looked through YouTube and other platforms that we planned on using, and it didn't exist, so we used it. And then we started expanding the platforms that we wanted to use and found that there is an existing podcast with this pretty much exact name. I think it's just left, right, center. Like, so it's, we have an and in there, so it's a little different. But so we've kind of made the decision that we're going to be changing the name of the podcast, we're adding in podcasting, so we're going to change the name of the show. We have a couple options. I don't want to say them out loud yet, just so someone doesn't. The 4 people watching today don't snatch it up. But yeah, so look for that. We're likely going to be changing the name. And once we pick one, we'll have another podcast under this name. We'll say what it is so that you know what to look for when you're Googling and stuff. But yeah, keep an eye out for it. It's going to be changing.
Tell you what, everybody, if you have a $1 million name and you're not going to copyright it and screw us over, throw it in the chat. Throw it in the comment.
Yeah, we're open to suggestions. We have a couple that we really like, but we're not dead set yet. So yeah, help us out. Give us some names. Let us know what you think.
Word. All right, everybody. That, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Most of you are return members, so thanks for watching. I know it's a bit weird without Chris. We're still getting into it. I think we're going to be okay until he gets back. So with that, thanks for stopping by, everybody.
Thanks. Peace.